rebel car. Gentlemen, start your engines!
Hey gang, how you all doing? So this mini retro review, all about Daytona USA 2 Battle on the Edge and Daytona USA 2 Power Edition, is actually part of a much larger video that I made, all about the entire history of Daytona USA, looking at all of its home ports, its sequels, and also covering its legacy as well. So if you enjoy this video, make sure to check out the full version, known as 25 Years of Daytona USA. If you've already seen the full version, then stay tuned because this might still interest you, because I've actually updated a few bits of this, just because some of the old information in it was a little bit out of date, specifically the bits pertaining to the Supermodel network and the fact that you can now do a multiplayer link-up full speed with it. In the meantime though, I hope you enjoyed this retrospective look back at the mighty Daytona USA 2, an absolutely superlative sequel to the Model 2 original, which for some absolutely insane crazy reason has still yet to ever be ported to a home system properly. Daytona USA's first true sequel came in 1998 in the form of Daytona USA 2 Battle on the Edge. Daytona USA 2 ran on the successor to the Model 2 board, Sega's brand new Model 3 arcade hardware that had debuted 2 years earlier with the arcade racer Scud Race. Upon its release, the Model 3 board was more powerful than any other arcade platform on the market and was light years ahead of anything that the home console and computer markets could do at the time. This is reflected in the graphics, which you can see are a massive step up from the original Daytona USA that I think could still give a lot of contemporary games a run for their money. Just like the first game, Daytona 2 gave you a choice of 3 different tracks to choose from, of varying difficulties. The beginner, Astro Waterfall Speedway, the advanced track, Joyopolis 2020 Amusement Park, and the expert stage, Virtuous City. But unlike the original Daytona, it now gave you a selection of 3 different cars to choose from, that varied in the difficulty of their handling, with players that opted to go for the hard level car being rewarded with greater top speed and a greater drifting ability. One notable omission though from the car selection screen was the original Hornet that looked like it had been benched in favour of these 3 new cars. Anyway, let's have a look at all of these cars and tracks in action, starting with the Chums Gums car, the beginner level car, on the beginner circuit.
Time extension. that red line on the track. Time extension. Time extension. Time extension. Time extension.
So much like the original Daytona USA, drifting was the name of the game here. Unlike the first game though, there was much more of an emphasis on using both the brakes and the gears to drift here. Trying to drift using the gears alone would often result in the car spinning out, particularly if you're using the hard level car, the Phantom Full Force. Despite the differences in the handling between Daytona USA 1 and 2, one thing that stayed the same was the rocket start, which once again involved keeping your foot fully depressed on the brake whilst trying to keep the tachometer as close to 7 RPMs as possible by partially depressing the accelerator. As soon as the countdown finishes, release the brake, fully depress the accelerator and immediately shift up to 2 whilst trying not to drive into the cars in front of you. There was also a much greater emphasis on drafting in Daytona USA 2, the technique whereby you position yourself behind an opponent's car and take advantage of the decreased wind resistance that you get, increasing your top speed. The game also had some secret functions, such as a time attack mode, an additional 4 secret views on top of the 4 regular ones,
Time extension. 7 laps to go. Hang in there. Time extension. Time extension. Time extension.
As well as the secret views, there was also another secret option that let you play the game in a mirror mode. Battle on the Edge's successor actually managed to go one better than this by adding in an option that let you play the tracks in reverse, which lets you see previously unseen details on the track, like this big face here just before you get to the funfair section on the advanced stage. Or just after it, I suppose I should say, if you're playing in reverse mode. And the subway train here on the expert course, which I can't say I've ever really noticed before when I'm playing it the right way round. You could even mix and match the reverse and mirrored mode and play the game in reverse in mirrored mode. Playing the game this way really messes with my head in terms of my expectations of what corner should be coming up next. But we are jumping the gun just a little bit by talking about that game here. We'll come on to that in a bit. Much like the first Daytona, there was an option in the game's test menu that allowed arcade operators to change the game to either a Grand Prix or an endurance mode, which greatly increased the number of laps you needed to do. In the Grand Prix mode, the beginner, advanced and expert courses required 40, 20 and 10 laps respectively to complete. The endurance mode took things up to an even more insane level, with races that could be set to either 100 miles, 200 miles, 300 miles, 400 miles or 500 miles. If you set the endurance mode to its highest setting, you had to complete 500 laps of the beginner stage, 223 laps of the advanced stage and 87 laps of the expert stage. Frigging hell, that is a lot of Daytona. As you played through the endurance mode, your car would slowly run out of gas and your tyres would gradually get worn down, which would decrease your car's performance, requiring you to pit in to sort these problems out. This added a tactical element to the gameplay that you didn't normally get in the regular sprint arcade mode, so the game was jam-packed with secrets and options. There was even an option that let you change the person who sang the songs in the game. Not long after the release of Battle on the Edge, a new and updated version of Daytona USA 2 came out, called Power Edition. Power Edition featured a couple of notable changes from Battle on the Edge, the first being the return of the Hornet as a playable car, complete with its Daytona 1 physics intact. The next biggest change was the beginner stage's environment. In Power Edition they dropped the biodome of the first game and decided to go for more of a generic NASCAR type track instead. Now I have got absolutely no idea why they made this change. I don't know if perhaps they wanted to make the game appeal more to the North American market, which is after all the home of NASCAR. And perhaps the biodome setting just seemed too fantastical. Perhaps they made the changes to try and make the game seem aesthetically more similar to the first Daytona. Who knows? All I can say is it seems like a real shame, as the biodome is definitely a lot more interesting looking than this track. Not that I've got anything against it, mind you. Something else that changed was the paint job of the Easy Level car, with the sponsors being changed from Chum's Gums to the equally fictitious JC Eagle. Again, I'm not sure why this change was made, but I guess maybe the sight of the two cuddly little bears on the back of the Chum's Gums car just didn't seem manly enough for the NASCAR loving guys in the US. Again, I think this change was a bit of a shame because I think the Chum's Gums car has just got a little bit more character than the JC Eagle one. Perhaps the biggest change of all though was the inclusion of something called the Challenge Mode. The Challenge Mode combined the advanced, expert and beginner stages into one long course that you race through seamlessly with no break in the action. It's a brilliant idea and definitely something that would have added to the longevity factor of this game. As far as a few minor changes go, the game's introduction was slightly different to Battle on the Edge, and the car's handling had also been changed slightly, with some subtle changes in the drift physics between the two games. Now I've got to admit, playing the two different games, I can't actually tell any difference in how things handle myself. But I definitely think Battle on the Edge has got more aggressive AI, which makes the game a little bit harder than Power Edition. Just like the original Daytona USA, Daytona USA 2 also supported multiplayer, with the difference being this time that this game could actually support a massive multiplayer network of 16 players. Wow! Back in the day though, the biggest amount of Daytona USA 2 cabs that I ever saw linked together was 8. I would be interested to know, dear viewers, if any of you got to enjoy a 16-player setup on this game back in the day. Let me know in the comments. Now, despite being the sequel to one of the most successful arcade racing games of all time, for some strange reason, Daytona USA 2 never ever received a home port. I've previously made another video where I talked in depth about all the possible reasons why this game and certain other Model 3 games never got home ports, so I'm not going to go into detail about that again here. But what I thought has always been especially puzzling is the fact that Sega decided to re-release Daytona USA 1 on the Dreamcast rather than making a port of this game, particularly as Toshihiro Nagoshi was a producer on Daytona USA 2 and design director on Daytona USA 2001. It's also puzzling as well, considering that Daytona USA 2001 had 3 entirely brand new tracks created for it, that someone at Sega didn't just think, hey, let's just put the Daytona USA 2 tracks in the game instead. Now, despite never getting a home port of its own, the Daytona USA 2 tracks did eventually turn up in another Sega game, with the challenge course from Power Edition appearing as an unlockable bonus in Outrun 2 on the original Xbox. The two games have got very different handling physics, so playing the challenge course in Outrun 2 does feel like a slightly different gameplay experience. But as a tribute to a slice of Sega arcade racing history that never received a home port, it's an incredibly nice touch and a very welcome addition to the game. The challenge course in the Japanese version of Outrun 2 would go on to have further cosmetic improvements to make it even closer to the original arcade version of Power Edition. And just like the regular stages in Outrun 2, the Daytona USA 2 bonus stages were also playable in Xbox System Link multiplayer, with I think a maximum of 6 people being able to link up their Xboxes. Despite never receiving a home port, Daytona USA 2 did eventually become playable on home computers back in 2011 through the wonders of modern emulation and a specific emulator called Supermodel. And this is where all the footage from Battle on the Edge and Power Edition has come from that you've been watching in the video. Since that time, refinements in the emulation have steadily improved, to the point that the game seems to me to be arcade perfect now, complete with force feedback and everything. And much like Model 2 emulator, it actually improves on the original arcade game by adding in an optional widescreen mode and the option to play in HD resolutions. The latest versions of Supermodel have even started to include an experimental network build, allowing you to link up multiple versions of the emulator for multiplayer. Now, one of the interesting things about arcade ROMs getting dumped and then emulated is that it gives hackers and coders a chance to poke around in the original ROM's code and see if they can find anything interesting. And one such find was that the Hornet Classic was actually included in Battle on the Edge, but it just never made the final cut for some reason. We can see here that the version of the Hornet included in Battle on the Edge looks slightly different to the one that was in Power Edition, with an extra hood scoop detail on the bonnet. I should probably just explain for the benefit of any American viewers, bonnet is what we call the hood over here, and has got nothing to do with jaunty Easter hats. And through the magical science of ROM hackery and save states, it is possible to play this version of the Hornet in Battle on the Edge, even if you're a non-coding muggle like me. Whilst it is fully playable, unfortunately this version of the Hornet is broken, and will start to decelerate as soon as you start trying to turn left or right. So unfortunately, you're not going to be able to win any races with this one, champ. You'll notice the CPU cars in this are missing most of their bodywork decals. This is owing to the fact I can only run this save state on an older version of Supermodel, before things were quite as polished as they are today.
Watch that red line on the track!
Hey, so here's another new update from 2021. At the end of last year, somebody left a comment on one of my YouTube videos to mention the fact that the website The Cutting Room Floor had discovered that the secret version of the Hornet was actually playable in Battle on the Edge without having to resort to ROM hackery. By moving the gear stick into 4th gear before you get to the course selection screen and then pressing the view select buttons in a certain order, you will now access this secret version of the Hornet in place of the usual 3 cars, with the game announcing it as a special secret car for specialists only. Differently to the hacked version as well, the car's stats can be modified using the view buttons and steering wheel.
Beginner, you can use the secret car. Please decide the setting of the car. Hornet Classic. Choose manual or automatic transmission. Manual. Start your engines. 3, 2, 1, go! 2 laps to go.
So hey, this is a new edit, especially for this Daytona USA 2 Retro Review Mini. When I uploaded the original version of this, I mentioned that I was having a bit of trouble understanding how the secret car worked, because I was still trying to play it like the Hornet in Daytona USA 1. And that is not at all how this car plays, and as you can see here, I'm clearly not having a problem with it anymore. This thing is an absolute beast. Basically, it will start to drift without you even needing to brake, and once you start to get the hang of it, it goes like absolute shit off a shovel. You can see here how I'm just absolutely flying past all the CPU cars here on the very first lap on the expert track, something I wouldn't normally be able to do with the regular cars. It is like the Shin Akuma of Daytona USA vehicles.
Line extension.
Another interesting quirky little feature about being able to access the network in the game now is the fact that it means that you can now access the game's live camera option. This was a feature first seen in Virtua Racing in the original Sega Rally, where a separate machine would act as a live camera showing the race from all sorts of different angles. Virtua Racing also included a commentator called Vert McPolygon, whose comments would appear in text form on the live camera. Daytona USA 2 actually upped the ante a little bit over Virtua Racing here, by having its commentary in the form of sampled speech, including interviews with your pit chief.
Waiting for the other players. Gentlemen, start your engines. Ready to burst. The roaring start begins. Here they come, out of the last turn. They've been given the green flag. The race has begun. Let's check the current position. Car number 7 is on the top. We try to get car number 15 sleep. Why are you distracted? It's race. It depends on how the car is. We do not know destiny. I return the line. 7 laps to go. Who will win? Let's check the current position. Car number 82 is on the top. And second is car number 7. Third is
Another interesting feature of the live cam was that if you played on the challenge course, the game actually displayed the names of all the corners as you played through it. Although there was no live commentary when you played on the challenge course, unlike the standard 3 tracks. Man, you gotta love all the attention to detail Sega used to put into their games back then. Now to me, this is just another one of those features which really helped make Sega arcade races a cut above the rest, and really helped them stand out from the crowd. Now at the time that I'm recording this, which is late June in 2018, the original Daytona USA is still available to purchase from the PlayStation Network, which using my Sherlock Holmes-like powers of deduction, means that Sega must still have the license for the game. Which begs the question then, Sega, why haven't you ported Daytona USA 2 to current systems, you flaming idiots? Despite the fact I have played this game absolutely to death in emulation, I would still happily buy a digital download of this off the PlayStation Network if it meant I could play 16-player network multiplayer. I mean, come on Sega, what have you got to lose? Now despite the massive popularity of Daytona USA, and the fact that people still enjoy playing the game today, one of the curious things about it is the fact that Daytona USA 2 is still to this day the only sequel the game's ever received. All of that looked like it might be changing in 2016 though, when this cryptic image appeared online suggesting that a new Daytona was going to appear at the International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions event of that same year. Were we finally going to be getting Daytona USA 3? No. No, of course we fucking weren't. This is modern day Sega we're talking about. So the game that was initially teased as Daytona USA 3 in fact turned out to be a remake of the original Daytona USA, but with modern day graphics. A game that eventually dropped the 3 from its title and would go on to be known as Daytona Championship USA. So, a modern remake of Daytona USA, huh? What could possibly go wrong?
My cycle was fading like my eyes and flashes razor sharp. I give my life.
But I'm afraid This is where this particular mini retro review is going to come to an end. So if you want to get the full lowdown on the rest of the Daytona series, check out my 25 years of Daytona special edition video. I'm going to make one of those YouTube end screen cards appear that you can click on to go to it on the count of 3, 2, 1, now!